Welcome to A Court of Transformation and Awakening. I'm Lorrie Gray.
And I'm Amanda Grace Harrison.
And today we are discussing A Court of Thorns and Roses, Chapter 10. Nope, Chapter 9 and 10.
9 and 10.
We're doing something in there. I'm over on 10. I need to switch back to 9. Okay. Chapter 9.
Chapter 9.
Okay, so beginning here, Feyre has decided her best chance is if she can make Lucien her ally.
Yeah. Because she figures he'll probably want to get rid of her. He wanted to kill her, so maybe he'll help her find a loophole that will let her escape from this having to stay here in this manner, and she'll be able to go back home.
Yes.
So get him alone, chat with him, chat him up, see if I can win him onto my team.
See if we can get him as an ally. Yep, for sure. Which, as I was thinking about this, I'm like, okay, if we're trying to find metaphor for our lives here, right? Which is kind of what I'm doing. How do we turn this into our own transformation? I'm like, I think there's a significant moment here in, again, reminding ourselves we don't have to do cycle breaking alone. We don't have to make all these changes alone. And she makes a conscious choice to try to develop some allies, to reach out for help. Now, we've already talked a little bit about the concept of reaching out for help and how not easy that is. But it is fascinating sometimes where I'll have conversations with people, or even I'll check in with myself where we have those moments where it's like, it's just like me against the world and I'm entirely alone. And sometimes I'll have to ask people, like, is that actually true? Like, are there people that you could reach out to if you chose to? And that's been a fascinating conversation to find. I will sometimes talk to people and they will be telling me this story about how they have to go it alone and everything's so hard and everything falls to them. And then whenever I push about what relationships actually exist, I've even found people who are like, well, yeah, I mean, I've got these people in my life and they offer to help, but I'm just not comfortable with it.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to look at like the cognitive distortion of like, if it feels true, it must be true. Like, just because we feel alone doesn't necessarily mean we are alone. And even if, like Feyre, you are, there is a space of reaching out and finding people and calling for allies and developing relationships if we don't have them now. But very few of us, I think, are quite as alone as we feel sometimes.
Yeah.
And you and I have talked about this. There have been days whenever I don't even really need to talk. Sometimes I don't even call you. But I'm just like, oh, I could though, if I wanted to. If I needed somebody to just like spill this to, like, I just know I'm like, Amanda exists in the world. And I could just call her and I could tell her all of this and it would be fine. And it's not even, like, sometimes it's just knowing that we're not alone.
Totally.
Changes everything.
Yes. Just knowing that, okay, if I needed to talk to somebody, knowing that there are people who exist who I'm safe with is enormously helpful.
Yeah. And I'm like, just because I feel alone in this moment doesn't mean that I actually am.
Yeah.
Okay, that's deep. Now we can come back to what's actually happening.
Trying to find Lucien this morning.
So she's trying to find Lucien because she's going to develop this ally
patrol today.
But then she gets stopped by...
Oh, dear. On the way to the stables to find Lucien to get him alone. And what the heck? Tamlin's following me again.
Okay.
I just want to be alone, Tamlin. Just want to be alone right now, okay?
Want to be alone. And he's offering, if you want to take a ride across the grounds, I can take you. And I think Feyre does a good job of like clear boundaries here.
Yes.
Like, I'd prefer to spend today alone, I think, but thank you for the offer.
Even though we know that's a lie, because she would prefer to spend the day alone with Lucien, it's still, that's her, still she puts her, it's thank you, but no thank you.
Yeah, I mean, she does lie there, but even then he's like, what about, no thank you. Like,
nope. I'm just going to stop you right there. Nope.
And I love that reminder,
thank you for the offer.
Like, no is a complete sentence. I have to remind myself a lot of that, which brings up something else in this chapter. But the kind of almost like the broken record response of like, no, thank you. No, thank you. You can just say it as many times as you want until the person hears you or doesn't.
Which here, she could have said that. She could have said, no, but thank you for the offer. She's the one who added that I'd prefer to spend today alone. But then later she's like paranoid he's going to see her with Lucian and know that it wasn't completely true. But I love this. Maybe one day, if I was ever released, if there was an ocean and years between us, I would think back and wonder why Tamlin had bothered even trying to be nice and take her on these tours of the garden and all of this. But I love that. Like, in order for her to feel safe enough to even think about why he's being less than murderous, I'm going to need an ocean and years between us before I can even have that conversation with myself.
Right?
Like that she knows that about herself.
Right? Yeah. And kind of that, it's back to that conversation on like self-awareness. It's like, or like sometimes we know that there's stuff, but we're just not quite ready to really look at it or really consider it or really have all the information. And sometimes that's okay.
Someday I'll have that conversation.
Someday we'll look at that when there's time and space. Okay, so we find Lucian and he's like, yeah, go ahead and come along. Let's go patrol. And yeah, okay. So we got a number of things going here. I love we have another moment here where she's walking and she's again noticing sights and sounds and sensations. She's passing this lilac, she's looking at the color, she's looking at all these things, and again, not useful. I tell myself, not useful. Don't do that. Quit being who you are. Quit being connected to your art. And instead she goes to, oh, right, but on the other side of that lilac, I could hide in that bush. That would be more useful. That would be more useful. Almost like she has to convince herself, poor sweetie. No, it's almost, I wasn't looking at that bush because it was pretty. I was looking for a hiding spot.
And I accidentally smelled the sweet scent lingered in my nose, even as we rode on.
It was. She also has this shift here of, recognizing that, Andrus, who she killed, that he had a place here. He had friends. He wasn't just some nameless, faceless fairy, and that he was missed. And the first time that she says a genuine, like, sorry, and meant it. That she hadn't known these things. So that's kind of a pretty significant moment for her, because at one point, she said, like, feeling no regret for it. And this is starting to shift for her.
Well, these people are starting to seem less like just cruel, vicious, wicked beings. And she's like, all right, they're civilized. This is calm and peaceful. They're being polite.
Which is, okay, I mean, bigger picture here, it's so much easier when it's a nameless, faceless us versus them versus when you have a conversation with the them.
With the them
in question. But that was, okay, one thing I do not want to discuss on this podcast is politics ever, and yet I'm going to bring it up just momentarily. Gosh, why am I doing that? We can edit this out later.
This is fun.
This is fun.
Like to see where this is going.
Good gravy. So in the midst of this, like in the midst of, our country being in this political us versus them
broil,
right? It was such a thing. The interesting thing is within my coaching, I draw a lot of different people because I'm not coaching around a very specific demographic. It's more of like a psychographic. It's a needs-based thing.
I like that word, a psychographic.
Yeah.
I've never heard that before.
Yeah. I like it too, where it's more about a very specific type of work that they're looking for. And that type of work draws people from all over.
Right.
And so I had clients that across the spectrum, like very, very far left, very, very far right, and honestly, all across the middle.
Yeah.
And so when everybody else is in this us, them, I'm like, they're all my people.
Yeah.
Like it was almost like my brain couldn't even go to that because I couldn't separate out this group from the handful of individuals who I knew to be good people who were in that group.
Yeah.
And almost any group that you went through, I'm like, I have people in all of those groups who I talk with weekly and know about the intimate details of their life. Like, but if that hadn't been the case, like I could have compassion for how much easier it would be to have that against just a massive sea of people.
Yeah.
But there was my brain could never even go there, thank goodness, because I always saw individuals. And it changes all of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm the same way. I have like very close friends and family on every possible end of the spectrum. So and I'm constantly changing where I am in there based on whatever, you know. So it's like I don't know how I could possibly ever have any sense of an us and a them when it's just all us. We're all a big mess, and we all have such different ideas about everything and different experiences that led us to have those beliefs.
Yeah. And so it went from fairies, like this group, to, oh, it's Tamlin and it's Lucian and his name was Andros, and we have Alis, and we're meeting people and they're not what she thought they were once you get to know them as individuals. They didn't all fit neatly into this categorical lump that she had put them into, and she's having to start to reconcile her experience and the way that she interpreted his death before with how she's starting to interpret it now. And it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Reconciling those things is uncomfortable, but I love our girl that she owns it and means it, and she's willing to go there. Good job, Feyre. I love too that she calls Lucian out here, like where he's being himself. And she just, I would have joined you if I'd known you would use this ride as an excuse to insult me.
And then he apologizes.
And he does. He does.
Of course, she's not sure if his apology is genuine or not, but
right.
Still,
it's the whole like not lying thing. But still, but it's one of those things, you know, again, like deeper truths. I'm like, how often, like, does somebody say something and we don't like it and we just zip it and say nothing? I'm like, I tell people all the time when they're like, I think I need to work on boundaries. I like refuse to work on boundaries with people before we've worked on honesty.
Yeah. There's no point in having boundaries that you're keeping. Be honest about your boundaries.
I'm like, this situation that you don't like, have you just simply said, like, I don't like it when you say that? I don't like it when this topic comes up.
Because that is a boundary right there.
Well, I think, see, now the way that I define boundaries is boundaries are actions that we take to keep ourselves safe. Mm-hmm. So I always talk about there being 3 layers. There's one, which is where we're just honest with people about what we like and don't like and want and don't want. And then there's a layer of just making requests. And then a boundary is like taking action. Okay, so since we talked politics, good Lord. So if it's like we're at the dinner table with family and somebody's talking politics, like an initial just like, hey, I don't like talking politics at the table. Sometimes people don't know that because we're just sitting there like fuming because we don't like it. And a lot of times if we just let people know what we like and don't like, that's enough. And if that doesn't change things, we can go to a request. Could we please not talk about this at the table? And it can be totally polite. But then the boundary is recognizing for ourselves that we're not willing to be in a conversation about politics at the table. And that's never about telling people, you can't do this. The boundary is I pick my body up and I take it out of the room. And that's how, like, a boundary is always something that we can guarantee. It's like, I am not willing to talk politics at the table. And so one option is like, you don't talk about them and I stay here. And the other option is I remove myself from the situation. But for it to be a boundary, the way that I define it and the way that I teach it is it has to be something that we can control, and it's always an action that we take. So honesty and requests, the thing is though, most of the time, if we do the honesty bit and then we do the request bit, we don't usually have to get to the third bit. Sometimes we do, and sometimes we just have to jump to the third bit because whatever's happening is not okay. Sometimes we just show a boundary by getting up and leaving the room, and that's all there too.
And that can also be a part of not having the communication skills, since we aren't all like that should be right up there with reading, writing, and math. It's that we should all, oh my goodness, it'd be amazing if we just all learned nonviolent communication all the way through school and learned how to know what our needs and emotions are and be able to communicate them clearly. But if you haven't learned that, then your only option becomes either stay in it and suffer or remove yourself from the situation, which then they might not even know why, and they just think you're a freak or you were offended, or they have to put their own meaning on why you left.
They have to do that. Yeah. I agree. Like these skill sets, and I can't tell you how many people I've talked to as an adult, and they're like, why weren't we learning this in school?
It's just the most important. You use it way more often than you use algebra.
Why are
I
we
do use
learning
algebra, but not as often as I use communication with other humans.
communication and like emotional literacy and emotional regulation skills and oh my goodness, like self-regulating skills, like things that are so beneficial. And I know there have been some push for it. I like the Calm app for meditation. I know they had a thing for a while where they would give any teachers like a free subscription if they wanted to use it in the classroom of doing like calming exercises with the students. So I think that there's a greater awareness of the need, but the implementation and changing an entire system,
It's slow,
it's slow.
but it's going to happen over
It's
time. It has to if we're going to survive as a species, I think.
yeah, it's a thing. I forget how we got on that tangent, what we were talking about before that.
It was boundaries, honesty. I don't actually
I don't know either.
Something to do with that.
But her being, yeah, but the ability to be honest. Oh, I don't know, because because she's like, basically quit insulting me. He's
right.
like, okay. She's like, I didn't know you were gonna do that. You know, it's a little bit different, but it has been an ongoing thing that I've been working on, and I don't do it. Sometimes in certain situations, I still freeze. Like I still shut down. But learning to like in safer spaces to be able to say, I actually don't agree with that, or I'm actually not comfortable talking about that, or can we switch the subject? And I still have like anxiety over it, right? Because we're taught like be quiet, but it's been so empowering and so helpful. And so often there's so much unnecessary angst and drama and complication from our inability to be honest. And again, it's just one of those things like I just don't say that in a way that's judgmental. Like I don't say like just because we know like being honest would be helpful that suddenly we can snap our fingers and everybody can do it, or that every situation is safe to do it. But there are a lot of situations where I talk to people and they're completely safe to do it. It's more about that they've been taught it's not polite, and really working through those blocks of understanding like
they're just scared it's gonna rock the boat too much.
Yeah, so there are deeper things. There are nervous system things. There are actual lack of safety. Like there's always nuance to any and every conversation. Like there's no way I can look at, through a podcast for a person's life that I've never seen and be like, just be honest.
Yeah.
No, I don't know. That may be a bad call. Don't listen to that if you know better. Like trust your wisdom. I'm just saying that often there is a place for greater honesty that keeps so much of that. I want to say I was going to say keep it down. That's what I mean. That like prevent so much of that internal drama and reading between the lines. Like when we just say what's true. But it is a skill set. It's that thing that we have to develop with communication. But really proud of Feyre here
doesn't come naturally
for speaking up.
Yeah. Well, and then he immediately returns with calling her out on exactly what she was doing.
Oh my
that
gosh.
Day. Her whole plan
Poor
for this, she
girl.
thinks she's being so sneaky.
She thinks she's being
going
sneaky.
along when she's pretending to hunt with him so that she can hang out and gradually sneak onto his good side. And he just comes out with, So when are you going to start trying to persuade me to beseech Tamlin to find a way to free you from the treaty's rules? He's on to her.
She's like,
Darn
at first
it.
she tries to deny it, and then she's like, dang
What?
it.
No.
Never mind.
That's not... I don't know what I was trying to do.
She was trying. It didn't work.
But he's impressed and flattered that she thinks he has that kind of sway with Tamlin. So at least it is kind of getting on his good side.
Yeah. It tells us a little bit about their relationship too. We're still figuring that out too. Like what is their relationship like? So we get a little insight into that as well. He says, I admire your balls, Feyre. I really do. I'm like, ovaries, man. I admire your ovaries. Or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Not this. Yeah. So again, this idea of like you're stuck here, her feeling like she just can't. But we do have some, some more conversation here where she learns a little bit about his role as emissary. She's hoping to get more useful information out of him asking these questions. It's not really a friendly conversation, but we do get to learn some things about shape-shifting. We get to learn about him losing his eye, and and understanding that not only did Tamlin not do it, he's like, he's the fact that he's like Cauldron, no, like the fact that like the idea that she would suggest him being violent, that he's like, oh my gosh, that's the most ridiculous thing ever, but he got me the replacement. Again, we're starting to get those indications that this beastly
Yeah.
man is maybe not terrible.
Yep.
Okay. And then,
Oh dear. And then I felt it.
Ooh, this scene is so creepy. Okay, so we're flowing right into chapter 10, guys. But so here, I tell you what, this creature is no bueno. Like that, this is just creepy stuff. We get to meet how do we learn to say it?
Bogey.
The bogey, like in golf. A bogey.
Our bogey.
Yeah. So that was no fun. And this is, again, as we talked about before, not all the stories about the fairies were incorrect.
Right. Some of the ones you wish were incorrect turned out to be true and terrifying.
Yeah. And we also see at the end of this here, we get to see a little bit of her fight. Where, do you ever stop being so serious and dull? Do you ever stop being such a prick? Like, but I love that he grins. He's like, yeah, okay, much better. He's wanting her to be like a real person. And, yeah.
And so she's finally talking back to Lucian, which is what Alice told her originally. Like, he could use somebody snapping back at him. And she, of course, is terrified too in the beginning, but now she's getting comfortable.
I love this, getting to see them talk. Okay, so we get through this, then we go to dinner, and Tamlin's a little upset because she definitely told him she didn't want to she wanted to be alone, and instead she spent the day with him. So everything's found out, and he's in a bad mood. And then eventually they do tell him about the bogey, and Tamlin goes and looks for it. I had to laugh though, like again, looking for, kind of looking at some of this deeper meaning. So Tamlin asks her, did you catch anything? And she just says, no. Lucian gave me a pointed cough as is urging me to say more. She's like, but I had nothing to say. I just no was the answer. And I was like, okay, now this is a point when Feyre and I part paths in terms of being able to relate. One-word answers, like, no. I definitely fall into the over-explaining, oversharing.
Yeah.
I can't say no. I'll say no, and then I'll give you 3 reasons, and then I'll repeat those 3 reasons from 6 different angles just to make sure.
Yep.
That you know why. The answer was no. That was an interesting thing. Like one I do just like talking. Like that's a thing that I'm not going to deny. But in uncomfortable situations, it is interesting noticing when people go to a place of oversharing when they don't want to, and they get that place of like, oh my goodness, it's like my mouth won't stop, and like it's going. And really understanding it's like a self-protective trauma response. It happens a lot for people who dealt with gaslighting, because it's like, if I just explain enough, then my intentions can't be misunderstood.
Right.
It can't be that.
But they always can be misunderstood. No matter how much you say, you're just digging yourself a deeper hole most of the time.
It doesn't really help.
I for sure do that a lot.
Oh my goodness. But my husband and I joke, like, if there's something that needs to be said and it requires 10 minutes to say it, he will finish in 5 and I will finish in 20. Mm-hmm. It makes for interesting conversations between the two of us. I am an oversharer for sure, but he is an undersharer as well. And maybe at some point we'll both just become
in the middle.
What's if it's not over, if it's not under, I want to say appropriate sharers. Appropriate sharers. But it is one of those interesting things to notice, like noticing our communication styles, as we were talking about, noticing what happens under stress. And again, I think for anybody, I always do like to share with you anytime I can use my story to normalize it for people, because I do think I'll have a lot of people and they do the, oh my gosh, why can't I stop? Like, why can't I stop?
Yeah.
Like, and there's that discomfort of like, ah! And I think one of the reasons I love brain science and like one of the reasons I love understanding this, because if I can just give an explanation to myself or to people, and it's like, yeah, here's a possible explanation for what is happening. And if people can just get to the place of like, oh, that makes sense. Okay, I get why that might happen. Where we can release a little bit of that tension and a little bit of that shame that we're holding of like, why can't I do this? Well, because your rational brain's not totally in charge right now. We're in a little bit of self-protection. And for whatever reason, this is the part that feels safe.
This makes us feel safe.
It's not really helping.
Talking more. Oh my gosh.
It's not really helping.
That's going to help.
But it feels safe. All right. So Tamlin goes out to hunt the bogey.
Yes. That's when she figures out that, So it's this terrifying thing. I'm not even allowed to look at it. Lucian's like, don't look at it. Don't listen to it, anything. And yet Tamlin is going to go hunt it because he's capable of killing something like the bogey.
Yeah.
Yet he'd served me that first night, offered me life rather than death. And yet he's so fierce that he can go hunt this terrible, horrible monster creature.
Yeah. And we start to see that, that there are these differences. And I love, too, that we already have this moment where she's watching for his return, seeing if he can survive. And she's waiting up for him a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And then we see, dun, 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 her father.
Yeah. He's like, there's a creature. It's a male. It's hunched. It's coming towards me. But it's not a fairy. It's a man. It's my father.
It's my father. End chapter 10.
And that's that, folks. Thanks so much for watching this episode, chapter 9 and 10 of A Court of Thorns and Roses. And if you haven't already, be sure to go over to ACOTAR, that's ACOTAA.circle.so to join our community and interact more with these podcasts, and also get to know the community and join us in a deeper adventure if you'd like. And we'll see you next time for chapter 11.
Chapter 11. Okay.
Bye.